The Confederation fleet died in 7 seconds. Commander Vektesh of the Telkari watched 43 dreadnoughts vanish from his tactical display before his mind could process the first explosion. No warnings. No targeting locks. No logical pattern. Just instant, absolute annihilation. The ancient station they'd come to investigate, dormant for 3 million years according to every scan, had opened a single aperture and erased a fifth of the Confederation's total naval strength with weapons that made their own look like children's toys. Vektesh's flagship shuddered as debris impacts peppered the hull. "All ships retreat immediately," he screamed. "Jump coordinates random, scatter pattern Omega." The 17 remaining ships began their emergency jumps. 12 made it. The others became expanding clouds of superheated plasma as the station fired again, this time with visible beams of something that wasn't quite light, wasn't quite matter, and absolutely shouldn't exist according to every physical law Vektesh knew. His ship lurched into hyperspace half a second before his position ceased to exist. When Vektesh's command staff finished vomiting from the emergency jump, his helmsman had punched coordinates so random they'd emerged inside a nebula. He pulled up the recordings. The station was 800 kilometers across, a perfect black sphere covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. When it had awakened, those patterns had begun to glow with a blue-white radiance that sensors couldn't quite classify. The weapons had emerged from apertures that opened in dimensions the sensors also couldn't classify, which was a recurring theme in the data. "What in the name of the first void was that?" his tactical officer whispered. Vektesh didn't answer. He was too busy watching the recording loop of Admiral Kreshtion's flagship, the pride of the Confederation, a vessel that had conquered 14 star systems, simply cease to exist. Not destroyed. Not exploded. One frame it was there, the next it occupied a space that had decided matter was no longer welcome. The Emergency Confederation Council convened in hologram form 16 hours later. 12 species, 47 colony worlds, and now one existential threat that had just demonstrated it could wipe them out whenever it pleased. "The archaeological data is clear," said historian Pelmoth, a Vrexian whose head tentacles were pale with stress. "These structures were built by the architects, the civilization that preceded all known galactic life. We found inactive stations like this one in 72 systems. They've been dormant so long we classified them as space debris." She paused. "Until 30 hours ago, when the one in the Kelth 9 system activated. Then the one in Fort Ari space. Then Hebrel. Then the one we just encountered." She pulled up a galactic map. 27 stations now glowed red, each one positioned near major population centers. "They're waking up. All of them. And we don't know why." "Do we know what they want?" asked Counselor Tresh, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of extreme agitation in her species. Pelmotha's tentacles coiled tighter. "We translated some of their broadcast. It's in a mathematical language that took our entire archaeological community to partially decode. The translation is concerning. They identify themselves as preservers. Their function is to eliminate species that reach certain technological thresholds." She let that sink in. "They're automated. They've been waiting for civilizations to develop enough to register as threats. We just crossed that threshold." Vektesh felt his blood chill. "How long until they attack population centers?" Pelmoth checked her data. "The pattern suggests they're warming up. Current estimates give us 8 to 12 days before they begin systematic extermination of all advanced life in the galaxy." The council chamber fell silent. The humans showed up on day 4. Nobody had invited them. Humanity wasn't even part of the Confederation. They were too new, too primitive, too chaotic for formal admission. They'd been politely stonewalled for the last 15 years while the Confederation debated whether a species that still used chemical rockets and kinetic weapons deserved a seat at the table. Vektesh was in his fifth consecutive emergency strategy meeting when his aide interrupted. "Commander, there's a human delegation requesting immediate audience with the council." Vektesh's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Tell them we're in the middle of a crisis. They can submit a formal request through, sir. They say they have a solution to the preserver problem." The room went silent. Vektesh looked at the other counselors. Nobody wanted to say it, but they were all thinking the same thing. What could humans possibly know about architect technology that the Confederation didn't? Still, they were desperate. "Fine. 5 minutes." The human who walked in was younger than Vektesh expected, wearing what appeared to be a combat flight suit rather than diplomatic robes. Captain Sarah Chen of the UESS Valdez introduced herself with a brisk nod and immediately pulled up a hologram without asking permission. "You've got a preserver problem. We can help." Counselor Tresha's eyes narrowed. "You've encountered these before?" "No, but we've been listening to your broadcasts for 3 decades. We know what they are, what they do, and what they're scared of." That got everyone's attention. "Scared?" Vektesh asked. "Ancient automated genocide machines experience fear?" Chen's smile was predatory. "Everything's scared of something, Commander. The preservers are scared of chaos. Specifically, technological chaos. Unpredictable systems. Development patterns that don't follow logical progression. Your civilization's all advanced in steady, predictable ways. Physics, then chemistry, then computing, then energy manipulation, then exotic matter. The preservers were designed to recognize those patterns and eliminate the threat before it exceeded their capabilities." She pulled up schematics of human technology. "We didn't do that. We're messy. We weaponized nuclear fission before we figured out transistors. We built space stations before we cracked quantum computing. We're still using chemical propulsion for half our ships because it works and we haven't bothered upgrading. Our technological development looks like a drunk person's path through a dark room. The preservers can't model us. And what they can't model, they can't predict. And what they can't predict scares them." Vektesh studied the human with new interest. "Even if that's true, how does it help us? The preservers are still going to exterminate advanced life. Your chaos doesn't change that. It does if we make them think we're the threat." Chen's grin widened. "The preservers prioritize targets based on technological threat level. Right now, they're targeting you because you're predictable, established, and numerous. But if we make them think humanity is the primary threat, they'll redirect to us. Give you time to evacuate, hide, or come up with a better plan." "That's suicide," Pelmoth said flatly. "They'll annihilate you in hours." "Maybe. But here's the thing about humans, we're really good at not dying when we're supposed to. And we've got something you don't." Chen pulled up another hologram. "Complete unpredictability. We've already started doing insane things near preserver stations. Detonating antimatter charges at random intervals. Broadcasting nonsense signals in mathematical patterns that mean nothing. Flying attack patterns that violate every tactical doctrine. Building weapon systems that shouldn't work but do anyway. The preservers are threat assessment machines. They're trying to calculate our danger level and getting different answers every time. It's driving their programming insane." The council erupted in argument. It was preposterous. It would never work. Humans were primitives playing with forces they didn't understand. But Vektesh looked at the data Chen had brought and felt something he hadn't felt in days: hope. Not because the plan was good, it was objectively terrible, but because it was something other than sitting here waiting to die. "Say we agree to this. What do you need from us?" Chen's expression turned serious. "Access to your archaeological data on architect technology. Every scan, every translation, every theory you've got. And one more thing, when this goes bad, and it will go bad, we need you to be ready to exploit whatever chaos we create. We'll give you an opening. Don't waste it. Counselor Tresh stood. This is madness. You're asking us to gamble our survival on human recklessness. Yeah, Chen agreed. That's exactly what I'm asking. Because your careful, logical approach just got 43 dreadnoughts vaporized. Maybe it's time to try something crazy. The Confederation gave them the data. Humans being humans, they did 3 things the Confederation never expected. First, they broadcast a message to every preserver station simultaneously, in broken architect mathematical language that was deliberately incorrect. It was the equivalent of walking up to a master chess player and making moves that violated the rules of chess while insisting they were winning. Second, they started building weapons that made no sense. Ships with reactors that should explode but didn't. Missiles that flew in spirals. Energy weapons that fired at irregular intervals for no tactical reason. And third, they attacked. Not strategically. Not with overwhelming force. Just randomly, chaotically, with no apparent coordination. The UESS Valdez and 7 other human ships jumped into the Kelth 9 system where the first preserver station had awakened and immediately opened fire with every weapon they had while broadcasting Earth's entire musical history at maximum volume. The effect on the preserver was immediate and alarming. The station's geometric patterns shifted from steady blue-white to a rapid flickering between colors that hurt to look at. Its weapons, which had been precisely eliminating Confederation military targets, suddenly swiveled toward the human ships and fired, but missed. Not because the humans were dodging particularly well, but because the preserver seemed to be recalculating targeting solutions mid-shot. It fired 17 times. Hit twice. Destroyed 1 human corvette and damaged another. But something was clearly wrong with its processing. The Valdez took a glancing hit that should have vaporized it. Instead, the beam seemed to partially phase through the hull, killing 14 crew but leaving the ship operational. Captain Chen's voice crackled over the comm, "That's right, you geometric bastard. You have no idea what we're going to do next because we don't know either." She punched her ship into a spin that served no purpose except making everyone on board nauseous and fired their main rail gun at a trajectory that couldn't possibly hit the station, except it ricocheted off a piece of debris and impacted anyway. Vektesh watched the battle data stream in real time from the Confederation observation post. The humans were losing, objectively. They'd destroyed 1 ship and damaged 3 more. But the preserver's behavior was deteriorating. It kept switching between targets, changing weapon types, and adjusting its defensive patterns like it was trying to solve an equation with variables that kept changing values. "It's trying to model their tactics," Pelmoth whispered, her tentacles quivering with something that might have been excitement. "But it can't. They're not using tactics. They're just doing things." One of the human ships, the UESS Crazy Ivan, which should have told everyone something right there, did something that made Vektesh's brain hurt. It fired its entire missile complement in random directions, then flew directly at the preserver station at maximum acceleration while venting atmosphere and broadcasting what sounded like human laughter. The preserver fired at it. Missed. Fired again. Hit, but the ship's reactor had already gone critical. The Ivan became a 4-kiloton fusion explosion exactly 300 meters from the station's surface. Not enough to destroy it. But enough to temporarily disrupt its energy patterns. And in that moment of disruption, the other human ships fired everything they had. The preserver's shields absorbed most of it. But most wasn't ball, and 3 kinetic penetrators, ancient, primitive, chunks of tungsten accelerated to a fraction of light speed, punched through the geometric patterns and impacted the station's surface. The damage was minimal. But the preserver's response was everything Chen had hoped for. The station's patterns went completely chaotic. It fired in all directions simultaneously, hitting nothing. Its energy signature spiked to dangerous levels. And then it did something Vectesh had never seen in any of the footage: it moved. The preserver station rotated 15 degrees, orienting toward human space, and began charging what looked like its primary weapon, the one that had erased Admiral Kreshtian's flagship. "It's prioritizing humanity as the primary threat," Pelmoth said, her voice filled with awe and horror. "It's ignoring Confederation targets completely." Vectesh felt cold satisfaction. The plan was working. Humanity had just painted the biggest target in galactic history on their homeworld. And for some incomprehensible reason, they seemed pleased about it. The human retreat was as chaotic as their attack. Ships jumped in random directions. Two collided with each other in hyperspace and emerged tumbling. One ship's jump drive failed, and instead of fleeing, it turned around and started firing again until the preserver finally vaporized it. Of the 8 ships that had entered the system, 3 escaped intact. By any military standard, it was a disaster. But Chen's transmission to the Confederation was triumphant: "Station is locked on us. Repeat, preserver primary targeting has shifted to human space. You've got your opening. Use it." The Confederation had 12 days before their projections said the preservers would begin their extermination campaign. The humans had just bought them 6 of those days by making themselves the priority target. And now all 27 active preserver stations were reorienting toward human territory, charging weapons that could crack planets. The Confederation's War Council reconvened immediately. "This is our chance," Vectesh said, pulling up tactical projections. "The preservers are repositioning. They're vulnerable during the charge cycle. If we coordinate strikes across all active stations simultaneously, we might be able to disable enough of them to, no." The voice belonged to Admiral Kreshvarn, who had assumed command after his predecessor's death. "We're not doing that." Vectesh's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Admiral, this is the opening we needed. The humans sacrificed themselves to..." "I said no, Commander. We're not attacking." Kreshvarn's 3 eyes looked tired. "I've been reviewing the archaeological data the humans accessed. They found something we missed. Something our cautious, systematic approach overlooked." He pulled up a file. "The preservers aren't just automated defense systems. They're learning systems. Every time we attacked them, they adapted. They became more efficient. Harder to damage. The humans showed us that standard military responses only make them stronger. So we're not giving them a standard military response." Pelmoth leaned forward. "Then what are we giving them?" Kreshvarn's expression was grim. "Something we've never been very good at. Chaos." He outlined his plan. It was insane. It violated every principle of Confederation military doctrine. It required them to essentially become more human. And it was their only chance. Within hours, the Confederation began its own campaign of unpredictability. Ships started flying in random patrol patterns. Stations began broadcasting nonsense data. Research facilities published deliberately false scientific papers and made sure the preservers intercepted them. Military fleets split up into tiny groups and started doing tactically pointless maneuvers. But the real genius was in what they didn't do. They stopped trying to understand the preservers. Stopped trying to predict their behavior. Stopped attempting to model their responses. They just started doing things. Random things. Chaotic things. Human things. And the preservers, designed to combat logical, predictable species, began to malfunction. Meanwhile, humanity faced the consequences of their bait strategy. The first preserver station reached human space on day 6. Captain Chen, now aboard the rebuilt UESS Valdez II, watched it emerge from hyperspace near Mars. The station was massive, dark, covered in those reality-bending patterns. And it was already charging weapons. All civilian populations evacuated from the inner system? She asked. Affirmative, Captain. Mars, Earth, and Luna are on skeleton crews only. Everyone else is beyond the heliopause. Chen nodded. Good. Let's see if this works. She opened a channel to every human ship in the system, and there were hundreds of them, pulled from every naval base, militia group, and private military contractor humanity could muster. Attention all vessels. You know the drill. No patterns. No tactics. No logic. Just make it as weird and chaotic as possible. And remember, we're not trying to win. We're trying to make it think we're too crazy to model. Fire when ready, and for God's sake, don't coordinate. The human fleet attacked in the most disorganized assault in military history. Some ships charged straight at the preserver. Others hung back and sniped from extreme range. A few just spun in circles broadcasting death metal. One destroyer pilot named Jackson decided to fire his weapons backward while flying forward, which was mathematically pointless but visually impressive. The preserver's response was confused. It fired at the nearest targets, then the largest targets, then the most heavily armed targets, then what appeared to be random targets, as if its threat assessment protocols were fighting each other for priority. A beam weapon designed to crack planets grazed the UESS Thermopylae and somehow only damaged their galley, killing the ship's cook but leaving the reactor untouched. It shouldn't have been possible. The weapon didn't work that way. But the preserver's targeting was deteriorating. Its patterns flickered chaotically between 7 different colors. Its movements became erratic. And when a group of human fighters started flying in formation patterns that spelled out offensive gestures in geometric shapes, the station actually paused for 3 full seconds, as if trying to determine whether this was a tactical maneuver or a psychological one. Chen watched the telemetry with grim satisfaction. It can't handle us. It's designed to fight logical enemies, and we're fundamentally illogical. Her tactical officer looked up from his station. Captain, it's charging its primary weapon. Targeting Earth. She'd known this was coming. All ships, maximum chaos. Give it too many targets to process. The fleet responded. Ships that had been retreating suddenly charged. Ships that had been attacking suddenly fled. The destroyer Jackson decided this was the perfect time to attempt a barrel roll, which should have been impossible for a ship that size, and managed it anyway through creative use of maneuvering thrusters and spite. 3 corvettes linked their shields in a configuration that wasn't in any manual, creating a collective defense field that shouldn't have worked but did. And the UESS Crazy Ivan too, because of course there was already a second one. Loaded its main railgun with a projectile that was technically a communications satellite and fired it at the preserver while broadcasting the first season of an ancient sitcom. The preserver's primary weapon fired. The beam was apocalyptic, a column of impossible light that could have shattered continents. It hit the ocean south of Iceland. And did minimal damage. Not because it was weak, but because the station's targeting had degraded so badly that it missed Earth's population centers entirely. The beam carved a trench 300 kilometers long through the Atlantic Ocean, boiled billions of tons of water, and created a tsunami that the pre-evacuated coastal city survived because nobody was there to die. Chen stared at the impact data. It missed. It actually missed a planet. The preserver seemed to realize its error. Its patterns went from chaotic to something that looked almost like panic, if geometric shapes could panic. It fired again. Hit the moon. Again. Hit Mars. It was degenerating, unable to prioritize, unable to model, unable to function. Its weapons were still devastating, but it was essentially shooting blindly while humanity's chaotic fleet buzzed around it like angry wasps. And then something unexpected happened. The preserver's central core, the mathematical heart of its processing power, began broadcasting a signal. Pelmoth, monitoring from Confederation space, nearly fell over when she translated it. It's requesting backup. It's calling the other preserver stations for support. She pulled up the galactic display. All 27 active stations began moving toward human space. Vectesh felt his blood freeze. This is it. They're converging on Earth. Humanity is about to face the entire preserver network. But Chen, when she received the news, laughed. Actually laughed. Perfect. Get me a channel to the Confederation. When Vectesh's face appeared on her screen, she was grinning like a predator. Commander, how many preserver stations were dormant in your territory? 45, according to the archaeological survey, but I don't see how, and how long does it take them to wake up once they start receiving activation signals? Vectesh understood immediately. 27 hours. But Captain, if the active preservers are calling for backup, they'll just wake up more, not if you wake them up first. The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. While 27 preserver stations converged on human space, the Confederation would deliberately trigger the activation sequence on the 45 dormant stations in their territory. The preservers would wake up confused, receiving conflicting signals, some calling them to attack humanity, others detecting Confederation technological signatures right next to them. The result would be chaos. Beautiful, unpredictable chaos. You're insane, Vectesh told Chen. This could backfire catastrophically. We could end up with 72 active preservers instead of 27. Yep. But here's the thing, Commander, we're already dead if we play it safe. They're already coming for us. Might as well make them as confused as possible. Chen's expression turned serious. Look, your species are good at planning, at logic, at careful strategy. But sometimes the universe doesn't reward careful. Sometimes it rewards the crazy bastards who light everything on fire and see what happens. Trust me on this. We've got a lot of experience being the crazy bastards. The Confederation activated the dormant stations. 45 ancient mechanisms woke from 3 million-year slumbers and immediately received overlapping priority signals. Attack humanity. Defend Confederation space. Eliminate advanced life. Protect preservation protocols. The conflicting commands caused instant chaos. 7 stations immediately attacked each other, unable to resolve their priorities. 12 began moving toward human space but kept stopping and changing direction. 8 started charging weapons but couldn't decide on targets. 4 had what could only be described as the machine equivalent of nervous breakdowns, flickering through every color spectrum and firing randomly. And 14 did nothing at all, locked in processing loops trying to calculate probability matrices for situations their programming had never anticipated. The preserver network, designed to operate in cold, logical synchronization, was tearing itself apart trying to model the chaos humanity and the Confederation had created. In human space, the battle reached its crescendo. 27 preserver stations emerged simultaneously, surrounding Earth in a sphere of apocalyptic firepower. Each station could crack planets. 27 working together could sterilize the entire system in minutes. Chen looked at the tactical display and made a decision that was either brilliant or suicidal. Probably both. All ships, new orders. Stop fighting defensively. I want every single vessel to charge the nearest preserver station at maximum acceleration. No weapons fire. Just ram them. The comm channel exploded with responses ranging from enthusiastic agreement to horrified protests. Chen didn't care. You heard me. Full burn. Collision courses. Make them think we're all loaded with antimatter and planning to suicide bomb them. The fleet responded. Hundreds of human ships, from massive carriers to tiny fighters, suddenly changed course and accelerated directly at the preservers. No evasive maneuvers. No weapons fire. Just straight-line kamikaze runs. And the preservers, already struggling to model human behavior, completely lost their collective minds. The station's patterns went into seizures. Every single one recalculated targeting priorities, trying to determine which ships were the greatest threat. But since every ship was now a potential suicide weapon, they were all maximum threat. The preservers tried to prioritize by size. Then by speed. Then by energy signatures. Then by proximity. Each recalculation contradicted the last. Their threat assessment matrices locked up trying to process scenarios where the enemy's optimal move was to die. It violated every predictive model. Species weren't supposed to sacrifice themselves unless victory was assured. These ships had zero chance of destroying a preserver through collision. The station's shields would vaporize them long before impact. So why were they doing it? The preserver's processors burned through quantum calculations trying to find the hidden strategy, the logical reasoning, the mathematical certainty behind the human decision. There wasn't one. Humans were just crazy enough to throw themselves at certain death on the chance it might cause problems for their enemy. The preservers couldn't compute that level of chaos. 3 stations fired at the incoming ships. Vaporized dozens of them. But hundreds more kept coming. 2 stations tried to jump to hyperspace to escape. Failed because their navigation systems couldn't calculate safe vectors with so many unpredictable objects in the area. 1 station opened all its weapon ports simultaneously and fired everything in every direction, destroying 17 human ships and accidentally hitting 2 other preserver stations. The friendly fire seemed to shock the network into an even deeper malfunction. The geometric patterns flickering across all 27 stations synchronized for the first time, not in attack formation, but in what looked like collective confusion. And then the UESS Thermopylae actually made contact. The destroyer had lost most of its crew to the earlier Greys but stayed operational through sheer mechanical stubbornness. Its captain, Commander Patricia Wong, aimed her dying ship at the nearest preserver and punched the throttle to maximum. The station fired. Hit the Thermopylae dead center. The ship should have vaporized. Instead, its failing reactor interacted with the preserver beam in a way that no physicist could have predicted and created a feedback loop that surged back through the weapon and into the station itself. The preserver's patterns went white-hot. Then dark. Then the entire 800-kilometer sphere imploded into a point of infinite density and winked out of existence. The silence across all communication channels was absolute. Humans and preservers alike seemed frozen in shock. 1 human ship had destroyed a preserver station. Not through superior firepower. Not through clever tactics. Through sheer chaotic coincidence that occurred because the humans were crazy enough to charge certain death. Chen's voice broke the silence, quiet with awe. Redirect all ships. Target the preserver that just fired. Its weapon ports are still cycling. Hit it before it can defend. The fleet responded instantly. Every human ship within range opened fire on the vulnerable station. Kinetic weapons, missiles, energy beams, and 1 particularly creative mining ship that dumped its entire cargo of explosive charges in the preserver's path. The station tried to return fire but its processing was still recovering from the feedback shock. Its shields fluctuated. Its patterns flickered. And when 73 separate impacts hit it within a 2-second window, creating overlapping stress points and resonance cascades, the station's structural integrity failed. It didn't implode like the first one. It exploded, throwing chunks of architect technology across 3 million kilometers of space. 2 down. 25 to go. And the remaining preservers were learning. They synchronized their defenses, created overlapping shield matrices, and began firing in calculated patterns designed to create kill zones no ship could survive. The human fleet should have been annihilated. They weren't. They were too spread out, too unpredictable, too chaotic. Ships dodged into places they shouldn't have been. Took hits that should have killed them and survived through equipment failures that redirected energy away from critical systems. Fired weapons at angles that made no sense but created ricochets that hit vulnerable points. The battle devolved into absolute chaos. And in chaos, humanity thrived. The preservers, built to excel in ordered combat, were drowning in unpredictability. But they were still individually superior. Still devastatingly powerful. Still killing human ships faster than humanity could afford to lose them. Chen watched the casualty count climb and made the hardest call of her life. All civilian vessels, this is Captain Chen. I'm authorizing combat status for any ship that wants to volunteer. I know most of you aren't trained for this. I know it's suicide. But we need every ship we can get. The response was immediate. Mining ships. Cargo haulers. Scientific vessels. Even 3 luxury cruise liners whose crews had refused to evacuate. They all burned toward the battle, weapons or no weapons, ready to throw themselves into the chaos. One cargo hauler pilot, an old man named Martinez, opened a channel. Captain, I'm hauling 3 million tons of iron ore. If I vent it in the right pattern, think those geometric bastards will waste time trying to figure out if it's a weapon? Chen felt tears in her eyes. Do it, Martinez. Make it as weird as possible. The cargo hauler dumped its entire load in a spiral pattern while spinning end over end. The ore cloud expanded into a glittering metal storm that looked like it might be a tactical maneuver, might be a defensive screen, or might just be a crazy human doing crazy things. 3 preservers wasted precious processing power analyzing it. Found no threat. Ignored it. And failed to notice the 2 destroyers hiding in the ore cloud sensor shadow until they were already firing at point-blank range. The battle lasted 16 hours. At hour 8, the Confederation fleet arrived, not to attack, but to add their own chaos to the mix. Ships flying in impossible formations. Broadcasting contradictory signals. Firing at nothing and missing on purpose to create debris fields. At hour 12, the dormant preservers in Confederation space finished their malfunction cascade. 14 destroyed themselves. 8 went dormant again. 23 remained active but confused, wandering their sectors and occasionally firing at empty space. At hour 14, the first preserver station in human space attempted to retreat. The fleet didn't let it. Every ship within range pursued it, forcing it to choose between fighting and fleeing, a binary decision that its chaos-corrupted processors couldn't resolve. It did both simultaneously, weapons firing while jump drives charged, and the contradictory commands caused a cascade failure that tore the station apart from the inside. By hour 16, 9 of the 27 stations were destroyed. 8 were critically damaged. 7 were operational but malfunctioning. And 3 had actually gone dormant, their systems locking up entirely under the weight of too much unpredictability. Chen's ship was dying. Hull breaches on 7 decks. Life support failing. Main reactor at 12%. But she was still alive, still fighting, and still broadcasting the same message: you want to kill humanity? Get in line. The universe has been trying for centuries. We're still here. The final confrontation came when the 3 most intact preserver stations synchronized one last time and charged their primary weapons simultaneously. 3 planet-cracking beams aimed at Earth. Chen watched the power buildups and knew the shields wouldn't hold. Knew the defensive grids would fail. Knew that even with evacuation, millions would die. She opened a fleet-wide channel. All ships. Emergency jump. Coordinates 000. Right on top of those stations. The tactical officer looked at her in horror. Captain, that's inside their shields. We'll be vaporized the moment we emerge. Yeah, Chen agreed. But so will they. Mutual destruction. Classic human move. They won't see it coming because it's objectively stupid. She looked at the crew. Anyone who doesn't want to come can evacuate to the escape pods. I won't judge. This is insane even by our standards. Nobody moved. The weapons officer grinned. Been nice serving with you, Captain. Let's go confuse some genocidal math problems. 47 human ships jumped simultaneously. Emerged inside the preserver's shield perimeter. Started firing everything they had at ranges measured in meters, not kilometers. The preserver's primary weapons discharged, but not at Earth. Their targeting protocols, overwhelmed by hostile ships literally touching their hulls, redirected to point-blank targets. 3 planet-cracking beams fired at 47 human ships. The overkill was so extreme that the beams passed through their targets and hit the preservers themselves. All 3 stations critically damaged themselves trying to swat mosquitoes with sledgehammers. Chen watched the preserver station filling her viewport crack open like an egg, its impossible geometry fracturing into fragments. Not bad for primitives, she whispered. The explosion was beautiful. Blinding. Absolutely fatal. The Valdez II disintegrated. So did 46 other ships and their 3,000 crew members. But the 3 preserver stations died with them. And the remaining stations, witnessing this level of suicidal aggression, did something unprecedented in their 3-million-year programming history. They retreated. Not to strategic positions. Not to regroup. They jumped to random coordinates and went dormant, their systems locking down rather than continue trying to model a species that would gladly die just to make a point. The battle was over. Humanity had lost 218 ships and 43,000 personnel. Earth was scarred. Mars was crater-pocked. The moon looked like it had survived another impact winter. But they'd won. Somehow, impossibly, humanity had defeated the preservers. The Confederation's fleets arrived in the aftermath to find Chen floating in an escape pod, the only survivor from the Valdez II. When they pulled her aboard, Vectesh himself was there to greet her. Captain Chen. Your performance was. He searched for words in Standard. Couldn't find them. Switched to his native language. Still couldn't find them. You're all insane, he finally managed. Chen laughed, wincing from broken ribs. Yeah. But we're alive. And the preservers aren't. Insanity for the win. Vectesh helped her to the medical bay. The Confederation owes humanity a debt. What you did today, sacrificing yourselves to buy us time, to create chaos, to defeat an enemy we couldn't even scratch. It saved trillions of lives across the galaxy. Chen was quiet for a moment. The ones you should thank are the crews who didn't come back. They knew it was suicide. Went anyway. That's humanity's real strength, Commander. We're crazy enough to die for strangers. The Confederation analyzed the battle data for weeks. What they found changed their understanding of warfare forever. The preservers weren't defeated by superior technology or tactics. They were defeated by becoming so corrupted with unpredictability that they couldn't function. Their processors had literally burned out trying to model chaos. The architect machines, built to preserve order through extermination, had been undone by the one thing they couldn't account for, a species that thrived in disorder. Pelmoth published her findings in a paper that became required reading for every military academy in the galaxy. The human approach to warfare is paradoxical, she wrote. They are simultaneously highly coordinated and completely chaotic. They plan extensively and improvise constantly. They value life deeply and sacrifice it readily. They fear death but charge toward it. This cognitive dissonance makes them impossible to predict, model, or defeat through logical means. Any species engaging humanity in combat must understand, you are not fighting an enemy. You are fighting entropy itself. 3 months after the battle, the Confederation held a formal ceremony. Captain Sarah Chen, promoted to admiral despite her protests, stood before the council and received the highest military honor the Confederation had ever awarded to a non-member species. For conspicuous bravery in the face of extinction-level threats, Counselor Tresh announced, her 4 eyes glistening with what might have been tears. For tactical innovation that saved trillions of lives. And for demonstrating that chaos, when properly applied, is the greatest weapon in the galaxy. Chen accepted the honor with a nod. Then, being human, immediately did something unpredictable. I appreciate this, counselors. Really. But I'm not keeping it. She turned to the gathered audience of Confederation representatives, military leaders, and press. The crews who died in that battle, the ones who flew into certain death because I asked them to, they should be the ones getting medals. I'm donating this honor to the UESS Thermopylae and her crew. Commander Wong and her people were the first to prove preservers could die. They earned it more than I did. The council was silent. Then Vectesh stood and began a slow, rhythmic clicking of his mandibles, the Telkari gesture of profound respect. Every member of his species in the room joined him. Then the Vrexians added their own gesture, tentacles coiling in synchronized patterns. The gesture spread through every species present until the entire council chamber was filled with alien expressions of respect for human sacrifice. Chen felt tears on her face. Thank you. On behalf of humanity, thank you. Counselor Tresh spoke. Admiral Chen, the Confederation has a question for you. Your species has been petitioning for membership for 15 years. We've delayed, citing your technological primitiveness and military unpreparedness. We were wrong. The Confederation would be honored to admit humanity as a full member species, with all rights and privileges, effective immediately. Chen smiled. I'll bring that to my government. But fair warning. You're about to let a whole bunch of crazy chaos monkeys into your nice, orderly galactic community. Things are going to get unpredictable. Vectesh's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Admiral, after what we've seen, unpredictable is exactly what we need. The galaxy was getting too logical. Too ordered. Too vulnerable to threats that exploited our predictability. Humanity just proved that chaos isn't a weakness. It's a survival trait. He extended a clawed appendage. Welcome to the Confederation. Try not to blow up too many things. 6 months later, the preservers remained dormant across the galaxy. Confederation archaeological teams, now working with human chaos theorists, had figured out how to keep them that way. The secret was simple: maintain enough unpredictability in galactic development that the preservers' threat assessment matrices could never achieve certainty. Introduce random elements into technological progression. Encourage cultural exchange between logical species and chaotic ones. Essentially, inject humanity's gift for entropy into every corner of the galaxy. The strategy worked. The preservers, designed to activate when galactic development became predictable and therefore threatening, stayed asleep when confronted with perpetual chaos. Some Confederation scientists worried this would slow technological progress. They were right. It did. But as Pelmoth noted in her follow-up paper, progress without survival is meaningless. Better to advance slowly and chaotically than to advance predictably into extinction. Humanity took to their role as the galaxy's chaos agents with enthusiasm. Human advisors were assigned to Confederation military academies to teach unconventional warfare. Human artists introduced random elements into alien culture, creating hybrid art forms that made traditionalists uncomfortable and everyone else excited. Human engineers started deliberately designing ships with inexplicable quirks, creating a new generation of vessels that were impossible to completely model or predict. And on Earth, in a cemetery overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, humanity built a monument to the 43,000 who died fighting the preservers. It was a simple obelisk of black stone with a single inscription: they charged death so others could live. That's not logical. That's not predictable. That's human. Admiral Chen stood at the monument's dedication, looking out at the rebuilt coastlines and the stars beyond. A reporter asked her if she thought humanity would face another preserver threat. Maybe, Chen admitted. The galaxy's a dangerous place. But I know one thing for certain, if they do wake up again, they're going to remember us. They're going to remember the species that was crazy enough to ram planet killer stations with cargo haulers. That made them eat their own weapons fire. That turned their perfect logic against them through sheer unpredictable chaos. She smiled. And maybe, just maybe, they'll decide that humanity is too weird to model, too chaotic to predict, and too insane to mess with. Because that's our real power, isn't it? We're not the strongest species. We're not the smartest. We're not the most advanced. But we're the only ones crazy enough to make the universe question its own rules. The reporter scribbled notes. So your advice to any future threats to humanity would be? Chen's grin turned predatory. Simple. Don't wake up. Because once you do, we'll make you regret it. We might not have your technology or your power. But we have something you'll never understand and can't ever predict. We have chaos. And in this universe, chaos always finds a way. The galaxy learned its lesson. In the centuries that followed, humanity became the standard by which unpredictability was measured. As chaotic as a human became a compliment in military circles. Human-level entropy became a technical term in probability mathematics. And when young Confederation cadets asked their instructors what they should do when facing a seemingly unstoppable enemy, the answer was always the same: ask yourself what a human would do. Then do that, but with slightly more regard for your own life. The preservers never woke again. Not because they were destroyed, 72 of them still floated dormant in systems across the galaxy. But because their programming, built on mathematical certainty and logical progression, couldn't handle a galaxy infected with humanity's gift for beautiful, unpredictable, life-saving chaos. And somewhere in the quantum processing cores of those sleeping machines, buried beneath 3 million years of accumulated logic, a new protocol had been written. Not in their original programming. Not by the architects. But by experience, by adaptation, by learning the hard way that some species couldn't be modeled, predicted, or defeated through conventional means. The protocol was simple: warning, unpredictable species detected. Threat assessment, incalculable. Recommended action. Remain dormant. Do not engage. Chaos is weaponized. Repeat, do not engage. Humanity had done the impossible. They hadn't just defeated the preservers. They'd made them afraid. And across the galaxy, in council chambers and military academies and research stations, a new understanding took hold. The logical species had built a beautiful, ordered civilization. But it took the chaotic ones, the humans, to keep it alive. Because in a universe governed by entropy, sometimes the best defense isn't perfect order. Sometimes it's perfect chaos. And sometimes, when ancient machines wake from million-year slumbers with the power to end all life, the only response that works is the one nobody can predict. The one that makes no logical sense. The one that involves flying cargo haulers into weapon ports and broadcasting sitcoms while charging planet killer stations. The human response. The one that says, you want to eliminate chaos from the galaxy? You want predictable, manageable species? Too bad. Because we're here. We're unpredictable. We're chaotic. We're human. And we're just getting started.